Hackers claiming to be working with the Islamic State militants take over the U.S. Central Command's Twitter and YouTube accounts. Even though the accounts tweeted out documents that appeared to be documents with phone numbers and addresses of generals and other troops, the Pentagon says no sensitive information was compromised. In fact, U.S. officials are downplaying the attack altogether. They are calling it just an annoying cyber prank. One day after President Obama announced tougher rules on businesses who get hacked, White House spokesman Josh Earnest had to answer some serious questions.
There's a pretty significant difference between what is a large data breach and the hacking of a Twitter account.
The military eventually suspended their own Twitter account and terminated their YouTube page, and now they are both back again and running. The President's Task Force for the 21st Century Policing kicks off on Tuesday, and in its first public meeting, Gary Franchi has more with these details.
That's right, Midge. This special task force was set up in the wake of the illegal police chokehold that killed Eric Garner in New York and the police shooting that killed Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. The panel is tasked with coming up with new recommendations to improve relations between police and their communities, especially minority communities. They're a big focus of this new group. And as far as who's in the group, well, it's members from law enforcement, academia, and civil rights groups. Some of these civil rights leaders have marched on the streets in Ferguson themselves. As far as law enforcement officials, the police chiefs from Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Tucson, Arizona will be on the task force. Their first assignment is to deliver a full report to the president in early March.
Speaking of police and justice, 2 police officers in Albuquerque are charged with murder. And after grand juries in Ferguson and New York opted to carry on their proceedings behind closed doors, the prosecution decided to change things up and increase transparency in the process. District Attorney Carrie Brandenburg explained her reasoning.
This case is important. I think officer-involved shooting cases are important across the country, where we want to share all of that information with the public. We want them to see it as it's unfolding. I think that that's critical, to be transparent.
As a result, these officers will have to defend their actions under oath in front of a judge and a jury. This particular shooting happened in March of last year, but it was hardly the first excessive use of deadly force within the department. SWAT team member Dominique Perez and Detective Keith Sandy both shot 38-year-old James Boyd. This is the first time Brandenburg has ever filed charges against an officer, and it's not an easy one. She's already faced threats and accusations from the police department, and they accuse her of bribing a witness in a separate case. The officers could face either first or second degree murder charges, and if convicted, could see over 20 years in jail. Another case of police using deadly force goes to court and ends up in a mistrial. In this case, it was the police chief himself charged with murder in the shooting death of an unarmed black man. Former Udawil, South Carolina Police Chief Richard Combs was charged in the fatal shooting of Bernard Bailey in a confrontation outside of the police station. Combs was white and Bailey was black and unarmed at the time. Defense lawyer Wally Pascoe says both sides need to step back and reevaluate. As for the other side, the prosecutors say they are already planning for a retrial. In health news, another controversy brewing in the vaccine forefront. In New York, lawmakers are on the verge of instituting new mandates that would require preschool students to accept vaccines. We saw the first out in California, and we're talking about children ages 2, 3, and 4 years old. Vaccinations are a massive point of debate in the public conversation these days. Several polls show greater than 50% of parents expressed concerns to their doctors this last year before allowing their children to get injected. Meanwhile, the CDC is facing harsh criticism for botching this year's flu vaccine. Now, federal health officials say the flu has reached epidemic levels this year. He is the Massachusetts man who survived Ebola, Dr. Rick Sacra. He's one of the many health workers who contracted the dangerous disease in West Africa and was flown back here to the United States for treatment. He met with the media earlier this week.
Since my discharge from the Nebraska Medical Center at the end of September, where I was treated for Ebola, I've had a few bumps in the road, but God has provided through it all. My doctor has now cleared me for a full return to work and has said I'm well enough to return to Liberia. In fact, the experts tell me I'm immune. I don't plan to test that, but I'm grateful for it.
That's right. You heard him right. The doctor's flight departs for Liberia this Thursday. Sacra is going to be there for about a month. Officials at UMass Medical School say he'll be treating patients diagnosed with malaria and other chronic illnesses. Well, we've heard whispers for months now, but finally, self-driving cars are just around the corner. That is according to research published by the Boston Consulting Group. They find these vehicles could generate a $42 billion market. Xavier Mosquet at Boston Consulting says the first models are just months away, but the new technology will be expensive, adding about $5,000 to the price of a car, and they'll be here before you know it. Many other questions and concerns are on the horizon, but what would this mean for car insurance companies? How do they write an insurance policy if the driver is a computer? And is that more or less expensive than a human user? We will continue to track this development and we will keep you up to date.